And here we go. So, like I said earlier, tonight we're going to be talking about the common modifications for youth rules, the local rules of competition. First thing we're going to be dealing with are the USSF player development initiatives. I'm going to give you guys a quick little link for that in a second. These are initiatives that US Soccer has mandated for all small-sided games throughout the country. So wherever you're doing a small-sided game, this is what should be used on the field. We're mainly going to discuss the concussion protocols, what to do if you suspect a head injury, and the build outline. That's used for 7v7s. We've got, like I said earlier, Steve Larson and Mo Shafai here. They're going to come in and they're going to talk to us about their league competition rules, how they're similar and how they differ a little bit. We're going to go over heading, any player's equipment, what to do if something happens, how do you file a report for send-off or an incident with those two organizations, and any other general rules that they have, subs, playing times, anything else that we can go on. We hope to have about 15 to 20 minutes at the end for any questions that you guys may have. So, first thing we're going to tackle is the player development initiatives, is the concussion protocols. I'm going to give you guys a little link in the chat at the moment. If you want to read up on the player development initiatives at another time, you should be able to see it in the chat right there. Like I said, we're only going to be focusing on 2 of those things tonight. A lot of those things in that initiatives have to do with birth year registration, a bunch of other things that don't necessarily have to go with referees in general, but it is a nice read to go over once in a while. So, if a player has a suspected head injury, it is our duty as the referee to stop the game and make sure we check on that player. As always, players, spectators, coaches, referees, it is the referee's responsibility to ensure the safety of everybody. So anytime, especially at a youth level game, you gotta check on head injuries. If we evaluate a player and we decide that they need additional evaluation, that we are not sure that their player is okay, they must leave the field. Teams are allowed to substitute. They don't have to, but the point is a player who is suspected of a head injury must leave the field. At that point, when they leave the field, they are not allowed to re-enter the field unless they are cleared by a healthcare professional or a certified athletic trainer. Most of the games that go on will not have these 2 types of people at the soccer game. If that is the case, then that player, for his safety, should stay off the field of play. If the player has been confirmed to have had a concussion, or the referee undoubtedly believes that the player has a concussion and is a very obvious sign the player lost consciousness, has blurred speech, or any other obvious signs of concussion, we do not allow that player on no matter what. If a coach does not agree with this, or a team does not agree with this, or a parent does not agree with this, our job then is to end the game. At the end of the day, safety is paramount. So if the players aren't listening to their safety, we have no choice but to end the game. Are there any questions on the concussion protocols? Feel free to raise your hand or type into the Q&A section. Thought we had one hand there for a second. I'll give you guys a couple more seconds. Feel free again. If you're thinking it and you're not entirely sure, that probably someone else in this group here is thinking it. What are some of the signs to look out for? Again, this can be a hard thing because at the same time, referees in general are not really trained as healthcare professionals. If there's any doubt with the player, I would send them off the field. But things you can look out for are definitely general confusion. They don't know where they are, what they're doing. Slurred speech. Their eyes, are they dilated? Or any type of unconsciousness for no matter how long. They were knocked out for a second. That is a very good sign that a player could have been concussed. Steve or Mo, would you like to comment on this? Is there anything that you would like to add?
Yes, I do.
Awesome.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Mo Shafai. Couple of things that most of you are not used to it or whatever. If you think a player, hit his head against, let's say, a goal post or something like that, you're not equipped to evaluate a whole lot. The best thing you could do is to call the coach onto the pitch to take a look at the player. Now, you've been hearing, the player must leave the field, but the decision on that should be made by the coach. Ultimately, the coach is also responsible for that particular player. So, for instance, if somebody got a neck injury or a head injury, last thing we want is to be removed from the pitch. But we want to have a trained person to attend to that particular player. So we don't care if the game has to restart right away. The safety of the player is paramount. We want to make sure that is taken care of. Last thing you want to do, somebody to take the player off the pitch, and further injury would cause that particular player. So that's number one. For NorCal, a healthcare professional must be identified before the game. So if they come in and they say, hey, I'm the healthcare professional and here's my card or here's my credential, then you got somebody that is going to be, there for that particular team. If something happens, that person has a responsibility to take a look at that player. Now, if they do not have a healthcare professional, then once you think that somebody has a concussion, they cannot come in and say, well, I'm the healthcare professional. That is out the door. They must identify themselves prior to the game. So I just want to make sure everybody understands that, and do not allow that player to come back onto the pitch. You will have some coaches that are going to be adamant about it and push the envelope. At the end of the day, do the right thing and basically say, I'm sorry, sir, I'm not going to allow that player to come back onto the pitch. That's all I have.
Awesome, Mo. Thank you so much. Steve, did you have anything? Oh, I think I unmuted you. There you go. Did you have anything that you'd like to add?
Stuart, to say that a regular Cal North game would be highly unusual to have a healthcare professional there. Therefore, they probably would not identify themselves, and therefore they're not entitled to offer any professional opinion. It would be the referee's decision at that point to allow or not to allow that person back. Err on the side of not allowing them back. Secondly, the thing that question was asked is, how do we tell? Things you want to look for, not only are goalposts, but kicks to the head by the foot, a knee, a bounce of their head off the pitch. Even though it may be grass, it still jumbles little people brains. When they get up or don't get up, are first good indications if they're wobbly, in which case send them to the coach and get them off the pitch.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. A couple other questions. Will we be retaining the player card of that player? No, but I would definitely file some sort of incident report. We will go on later about how you write reports or where you send reports to certain groups. Does this apply to the adult game? The U.S. player development initiatives are not something that apply to the adult games. However, I do believe the practices should be applied. Again, if a player is concussed, the referee's job is safety. Most of us are not here refereeing high-level matches where players are getting paid and no one's livelihood is at stake. The only thing that's at stake is their safety. So again, that is what we want to encourage. Many coaches don't want to get involved with the injured player either. What happens then? I would err on the side of the player safety. Coach doesn't want to make a decision, you make the decision, sorry, coach, this player cannot play. Again, if it's something that it's in the gray area, err on safety. Are there any other questions on this topic before we move on? Again, feel free to raise your hand or type into the section, Q&A section. Awesome. So, I do have one more thing for you guys. To the people about heads or asking about what signs can we have for concussions. Again, we are not doctors. We're not there to diagnose. But if you would like to learn more about concussions for life in general, the CDC does have an excellent spot since this is an ongoing problem in youth sports. Again, I will paste it into the chat, a nice link that you guys can check out. Okay, moving on to the build outline. Now, I want you to raise your hand, click the raised hand button, if you have refereed a game that involved the build outline. See how familiar we are with this. Okay, so a fair amount of us, about half of us, about maybe a little less than half, about 35 out of 100. Okay, this is something that has happened in the last couple of years. If you haven't been reffing youth soccer at the U9 and U10 level, you probably do not know what this is. Build outline does three things in soccer. Well, first off, we should probably explain what the line is. On your screen here, it's that blue line. It's usually put halfway between the top of the penalty area and the halfway line. Most places, if it's done right, they'll have it in a separate color since it's a new line and everyone tries to get it. Sometimes all they have is white paint, so it'll be white. Usually some fields will try to give a dash if they can. Put some sort of dash mark on it, make it a little more obvious that it's the build out line. Other times, if we're really unlucky, they'll forget to paint the line altogether. That does not mean that the game should not be played without the build out line. If you're doing a youth game, there is no build out line present when there should be. Our job is to go to the coach and ask for their help. If they can get 4 cones, we can create our own build out line by putting a couple cones on each side. The assistant referee should be able to help with seeing where the build out line is, and we can use it for this game. So here's what is the build out line is used for. The first thing we use the build out line on youth games are with goal kicks. So we have all of our players here. Everybody on the opposing team on a goal kick, so all of these guys in red, have to be outside the build out line until the ball is put into play. On a goal kick, that means once it leaves the penalty area. So once the ball leaves the penalty area, it's in play. The opponents can cross the build out line. The second time we use it is when goalkeepers are holding the ball. So let's say in this scenario, the attacker takes a shot on goal, it gets caught by the goalkeeper. Once the goalkeeper has possession of the ball with their hands, all of the opponents must retreat behind the build out line. After that happens, the goalkeeper is encouraged to wait until everyone is behind the build out line. Then the goalkeeper is allowed to drop, roll, or throw the ball. They must release it from their hands. For games that are using the build out line, the goalkeeper is not allowed to punt or drop kick. It is considered an indirect free kick offense where the goalkeeper made the punt or drop kick. So in this case, goalkeeper releases the ball from their hands. Second he does, all the opponents can come over. The whole idea of the build out line is to encourage at youth levels that kids know how to play out of the back of the field, to encourage short passing, hone that skill down so when they get to higher levels, they already have it rather than having to learn it over. If we are back at this scenario, and before the attackers come over the build out line, the goalkeeper throws the ball, the attackers do not have to go to the build out line. Consider that the goalkeeper making a decision that he is okay with where the attackers are at that moment. Again, in youth soccer, as if with everywhere else, the goalkeeper does have to wait 6 seconds, or the goalkeeper does have 6 seconds until he can release, or until he has to release the ball. Sorry, I twisted my tongue there. That 6 seconds should not start until the attackers pass the build-out line. Again, our job as referees is to make sure things go smoothly. If you see a player standing around who doesn't know what they're supposed to do, or who is trying to take advantage of the situation, our job is to remind them of the build-out line and remind them where they need to be. Are there any questions about the build-out line so far? Awesome, we got Henry. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Hi.
Hi. So I'm wondering, is it an offense for the defending team if they pass the ball to one of their players that's outside the build-out line?
So in this scenario, let's say I'm going to draw on my scoreboard here. So let's say instead of the goalkeeper passing to his teammate, he decides to pass over to here and throw it all the way to that guy. Is that what you're asking? That is allowed.
Yeah.
Like on
Okay.
goal kicks or the goalkeeper, they are allowed to push the ball past the build-out line. You are not allowed to punt it. That's
Okay.
a great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. There is a question as to why these are not written in IFAB's laws of the game, because this is not something that IFAB has mandated. IFAB is the International Football Association Board. This is something that U.S. Soccer has mandated for U.S. Soccer. So it is on the U.S. Soccer website. It's not something that's happening currently outside of the country, to my knowledge. What is the distance from the center of the line to the build-out line? The distance is actually equal from the halfway line from the build-out line. So the distance, I will draw with my pen again, if I can get my pen up. The distance from this line to the build-out line is the same distance from this line to this line over here. That should be equal distance. That's how we mark it on the field. To clarify, during goal kicks, opponents can cross the build-out line after the ball is in play, meaning it's left the penalty area. That is correct. Steve or Mo, would you like to comment on the build-out line so far?
I'm good.
Awesome.
So far, good.
Thank you, guys. The last thing that we use the build-out line for is to determine an offside position. Let's get back over here. So I'm going to do another raise into the hands. I want you to raise your hand if you've ever heard that you cannot be offside if you are in your own half of the field. Okay, good. We've got some referees in here. So at the end of the day, this is kind of what offside normally looks like. There are other considerations, but your own half of the field, you cannot be considered offside. For games that use the build-out line, you cannot be considered offside until you pass the opponent's team build-out line. So the arrows get a little bit extended. The area in between both build-out lines is where nobody can be considered offside. You, as an assistant referee in normal games, you will be running from the halfway line down to the goal line. In games that involve the build-out line, we only want you to run up to the build-out line. Again, the reason the assistant referee goes to the halfway line is to check for offside. If there's no offside possible, we only need to run from the halfway line to the build-out line. Are there any questions about this?
Stuart, just quickly, most of the 7v7 games will not have 3 officials.
Yes. That is absolutely true, which again, if you don't have an assistant referee, you don't need to worry about their positioning. But if you are on a game as an assistant referee with the build-out line, you do not need to go half middle of the field. Most places will use single mans on 7v7 games, U9 and U10. Okay. So that is everything that I'm going to present today. I'm going to now turn it over to Mo Shafai and Steve Larson. Again, these are very high up the food chain referees. They've been repping for a long, long time. Mo Shafai is in charge of pretty much all the referees throughout NorCal, while Steve Larson is the same with all youth referees out of Cal North. These two organizations probably make about 90% of all youth soccer played in our state. So again, I'm very happy for them to be here, and I'm going to pass it on to them.
Steve, you want to go first or you want me to go?
Mo, I think you're first on the list. I've never been more favorable to give way to such a wonderful friend.
Okay. Let's go to the next screen. For NorCal games, as far as the heading of the ball is concerned, any age bracket of U11 and below. So on U8, we do not have any referees required. So you'll be dealing with U9s, U10s, and U11s that they cannot be heading the ball deliberately, okay? The key element for both organizations is going to be deliberate hitting of the ball. So if someone deliberately hits the ball, then first of all, I want to make sure everybody understands clearly, they are not committing a foul. As they put it over here, it is a technical offense. IFAB, FIFA does not recognize what we're doing here in the United States. This is just for our country, as far as I know. So if someone deliberately hits a ball, then you blow the whistle, and then from that point on is an indirect free kick. So let's say if a player just simply doesn't get it, and he keeps hitting the ball deliberately 20 times during the game, you have heard a term of persistent infringement. Persistent infringement only applies to a foul. So you cannot, under any circumstances, show a yellow card or a red card for someone that deliberately hits the ball for U11 and below. Does everybody understand the statements that I just made?
So I want you to raise your hand if you understand that. Looks like we got it.
Great. So that is as far as our position is concerned at NorCal. Now I'm going to turn it over to my good friend Steve.
As we look at the Cal North policy, a little background is probably needed. Cal North was involved in a lawsuit that started this whole process and has adopted a more stringent position regarding youth heading the ball. And that is that nobody 13 and below can head the ball. And as it stands now, this will remain current. And therefore, if you're doing an under 14 game or 14U, you would have to ask the coach to identify any player who's not eligible to head the ball. And like NorCal deliberately is the key ingredient here. Please don't penalize a player because the ball bounced off his head. It's an intention to head the ball. In the same indirect free kick where the offense occurred, except in the goal area. And then you'd move it out to the edge of the goal box.
Awesome. Thank you, Steve. Steve, if you are on two devices, try muting one of them for me. That might help you out.
Okay.
Again, we do have a question. In rec games where U10 and U11 are combined, are deliberate headers allowed? Again, this is something that is up to the local rules of competition. So depending on what game you are a part of, they may not be. The person who I would ask is the person who assigned you that game. They should be the ones knowledgeable into whether or not they can head. If you're at a game and you still don't know, and the game starts in about 5 minutes, you can ask the people who you're reffing with, and you can ask both of the coaches. Generally, the coaches are playing in that league all league long, so they would know the special competition rules that apply to them. Are there any other questions about heading the ball? If a player deliberately heads the ball to prevent an obvious goal scoring opportunity, again, denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity by foul means that the player has committed a foul. Heading is not a foul, it is an infringement. So you cannot give a red card for dog so heading because heading is not a foul.
Stuart, likewise, we cannot allow a goal to be scored by someone heading the ball.
Absolutely. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Steve as we go on to the next part of our process, players' equipment.
Players' equipment, I think, is pretty standard. I'm still fuzzy myself on what a soft cast is, but for the most part, if someone's wearing a cast, they're not allowed to play Cal North game. I think both of our organizations agree any jewelry, earrings, wristbands, Fitbits, what have you, they're not to be taped, they're to be removed. And likewise, the exception is medical bracelets and or necklaces are not considered jewelry, and therefore they are to be taped to the body, leaving the medical portion of the apparatus exposed, meaning they don't tape over the medical alert itself. Just the bracelet part and or the necklace chains would be taped to their body. Splints, there are splints out there now that aren't with metal or hard plastic, nylon in them. So again, in the opinion of the referee, if such an apparatus is worn and it's not a danger to the player themselves or to the other players on the field, a referee may allow them. But if there is any metal or hard plastic that, like shin guards, it can be removed, I would tell you they're not allowed, as they do present an imminent danger. Mo, anything different on your side of the field there?
I just want to add a couple of things, especially since we have some new referees and when they're checking the players. Watch for taped jewelry, earrings. If you see a player wearing a huge Band-Aid on her nose, it's not because she cut herself shaving. There's something underneath it. So simply ask, what do you have underneath? And most of the time you get the correct answer, and she has to remove the nose ring or whatever she has in there. The other thing about it is, if somebody's wearing leg brace, most of them do come with a cover, but just notoriously, ladies do not like to wear those hard cover over their leg brace because it doesn't look cool or whatever. So they may say it didn't come with it. And you'd be surprised how many times say you cannot play within 2-3 minutes. There's one produced. So just stick to your gun, know what the rules of the competition is, and keep them safe because it's for their safety and also for others around them. Okay? That's all I have on this one.
Mike, you asked a question, I think, regarding once a player has been instructed to remove jewelry, what is the response if they come back in with a taped nose ring and is later discovered? This is a good pregame aspect. If your AR lets that person back on the field with tape on it, we failed in the pregame to discuss that. It would be a caution, and the player would be sent back off the field to remove the taped apparatus.
So again, if it is a friendship bracelet of some sort, they just went to SeaWorld and they want to have their bracelet as their pass on it, it still has to be taken out.
William,
sorry,
yeah,
go ahead.
William, you asked about religious issues. If a player tells you that something is religious, you pretty much have to accept that, but it still must be made safe as far as you're concerned. So therefore, if it's a religious necklace, the same thing would apply as the medical necklace. It would need to be taped to their bodies. I suppose if they're posted earrings, you may have some thought processes there that they cannot be made safe. And if it's the case, you would still have to ask them to remove it.
Awesome. We do have one question. Players who have bobby pins or braids in their hair. What is our opinion on that?
Well, again, each of us may be slightly bent in a way or not, but that would be a call. Some bobby pins are, plastic nowadays. They don't present to be the problem they may have years ago when they were metal. And the same with barrettes. As a referee, you have to decide, are they, in your opinion, safe for the player who's wearing them to play? If not, remove them.
Okay. I still see a lot of questions here, but I want to make sure we get through everything. We will try to continue on with questions. We do have one raised hand here for Richard Gonzalez. I'm going to try and unmute you. Feel free to go ahead on yourself. There we go.
I wanted a discussion on. I've had several, three games actually, several, where the girls have braided hair and embedded in the braids are beads, which in my opinion was deemed to be dangerous, and yet the center referee overruled him. Can we talk about that?
Well, Richard, we could talk about it, but I suspect in this case, as we all know, the center referee is the ultimate responsible person for making that decision. And if the center referee deemed it was safe, then yes, he probably overruled you, but you could discuss that at halftime and maybe express your opinion more eloquently during a private time with the referee. But at that point, the referee makes that decision.
Well, I stood with the referee's decision. It's just the cases I had were the braids fly, and when they do headers for the age group, so does the braids fly when they hit the ball or challenge for a header. And I was seeing the beads, and I was just wondering, not to say whether I should overrule the referee because he makes that decision, but if I'm the referee, give us some guidance on a little bit of that information.
Okay, good question. And real quick, like I would say to you, if at the point you determine the beads become a safety issue, you would ask the player to correct it or don't come back on the field until it is. It's kind of like wearing soft-soled shoes with a wet morning, unless there's a reason to not allow it, meaning they're slipping and sliding, then you would allow it until it becomes unsafe, in which case the beads, that would present a safety issue. I don't know the fix for it other than taking the beads out, but that would be a decision you would make at the time.
Awesome, Richard. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move on to the next thing, which is report writing. Again, Mo, you would go ahead let us know what you guys think about report writing as well.
Okay. So there's two types of reports within both organizations. If a player gets a red card, or if the coach gets ejected, then there has to be a report filed within 24 hours on the link that you see is before you. In that, one thing that I would highly recommend is to take a picture of the player pass or a coach pass, and also take a picture of the game card that was presented to you in the very beginning of the game. Filing of the sent-off report is the responsibility of the center referee, not the ARs, but the center referee. So if you have those two documents, the player pass and the game card, that should give you enough information to be able to fill out the sent-off report that you see when you log into it. And the information that you are going to need is obviously most of it comes from the game card, and then you also need to have the name and email address of your ARs, assistant referees, and most definitely, and I purposely designed that form that you have to place the email address of your assigner. Many of you, the first time that you're going to fill out a sent-off report, you are going to miss some stuff. That's just part of learning. So that's why I want your assigner to be involved to critique you and make sure you're making a right decision. Best way to fill out a good sent-off report is paint a picture that you're not going to get an email or a phone call from Mo Shafai, because I simply cannot understand what you're trying to say here. Be descriptive. Who did to what, to whom, and all that stuff, and go from there. Realize that you have 7 categories that would constitute a red card. So as long as, even if you get it wrong, believe me, you will hear from me, but not in a way, I just want to educate you. So don't take it personal if I send you an email saying you may have used the wrong category here, and go from there, okay? And once you fill out the report and you submit, you will get a copy of it. If you don't get a copy, that means something went wrong, and so forth. So that's more on the sent-off report. It needs to be done within 24 hours so I could make a decision. I'm also on the PAT committee for NorCal by Wednesday of each week. When I make a decision, you would get a copy of it, and you would know exactly what my decision was for that particular player or for that particular coach. Now, other items is incidents report. Now, you may say, what is an incidents report? For instance, if you had a head injury, then we want to make sure that you reported. And that report is mostly for insurance purposes. Something could come back later on and figuring out that person was injured on the pitch, so the insurance would cover that particular person. That's something that is out of our hand, but at least we're doing our job. The other thing is, for instance, if you have parents that are being unruly, parents that are basically yelling profanities and that sort of thing, I need to know about it. NorCal needs to know about it. That's where you fill out that information on an incidents report. And again, most of the information that you need is right off your game card, and you just put in the description on it. For that particular one, you do not need the information for your assistant referees. All I need to know who you are, your email address, and your phone number. If I have a question, I'll come back to you and go from there. So those are the 2 reports that we have for NorCal. That's all I have on this one.
Awesome. Steve, is there anything you'd like to add as well?
Yes, I do. I appreciate what Mo is saying, but I have one more big thing to add to each and every one of you. I don't care if you're 13 years old or you're 45 or 55. If you don't write legibly, and I mean really legibly, it's almost impossible to decipher some of the things that we get. So I'm going to ask each of you to practice before you send in the final report and make sure we can read it. Secondly, it's a good opportunity for each of you to start learning soccer terminology. A red card is what kind of foul. You got to know what kind of foul it is, because if you put there was a reckless challenge that hurt the player, that doesn't it doesn't resonate red card. So you got to know what you're talking about to make it work. Our reports are likewise online, and those forms are there for you. They're interactive PDF. You can fill them out pretty much online. But again, legibility is crucial. And then on incident reports, I would like to remind all of you, more so even your youth, but not pertaining just to youth, misconduct, that is, coaches, parents, players who challenge you even way after the game down at the 7-Eleven or at the park the next afternoon. Those reports are incident reports, and you need to, again, not let that go unnoticed or unreported. Please fill out an incident report and send it to the responsible party. It's either your assigner or whoever's designated for your league to receive them. Again, please make them legible so they can read them, and so the PAD committees can adjudicate them responsibly and fairly.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. We do have a couple questions. I think one we answered, our reports still needed for ejecting parents or others watching. If you have an incident with the spectators, you do need to file an incident report. You are encouraged to that way. The controlling bodies of your game are able to deal with it. That being said, a referee does not have responsibilities or power over spectators. We have responsibility and power over the game. If the spectators are disrupting the game, our job is to stop the game and tell the coach to ask the spectators to stop. We do not deal with spectators directly. There is a great webinar that I will try to link to the end of this that Matt Buckman goes over dealing with referee abuse and dissent. Everything you need to know about dealing with spectators is covered in that webinar as well.
Stuart, to clarify for them, I think the question might pertain if you have to ask a coach to remove a parent. That is definitely an incident report that would be reported within 24 hours. More than likely, you may not know the parent by name or anything else, but the coach would, and you would therefore identify the coach you spoke to remove the parent. Or if it's both coaches, then again, you would include all that information in your report. So again, the league can take corrective actions for you.
Again, the question is, where do you find these reports? They should be on their websites. We do have the links up here. I also posted the links into the chat section of this webinar, so you should be able to see it there as well. Is there any other questions? Any?
We could do a whole webinar on report writing, folks, but that's not the purpose of this one.
Okay, we're going to move on to the next one. For other rules, general, how many people are playing on the game? I think NorCal's sheet is up here first. Mo, if there's anything that you'd like to go over that's specific to your league, feel free.
The only difference that you are going to see between two organizations is the time frame of the U14. The U14 under NorCal, they play 240 minutes. And the reason NorCal decided that was more to be in line with DA games. As in, if I'm not mistaken, Cal North, they play 2 35-minute snaps. Other than that, the rest of our the way we handle things, as far as the time frame is concerned, is the same. Build outline definitely the same, and so forth.
Awesome. Sorry, go ahead, Steve.
I was going to just, again, to let everybody know here, Mo and I work very, very close together for years now to try to smooth these differences out over time to make it easy for all the referees. So when you go out to ref a game, you would, so to speak, follow all of the same applications. And we're pretty darn close. There's still a few that aren't 100%, but we're really getting close. So the Cal North still uses the old true guidelines for the time limits on the game. So perhaps in the future, we'll see how that works in getting it more appropriate to the same. But otherwise, Mo is correct. I think everything else is relatively the same, other than that little bit of heading that's still not quite on the same page. But for the most part, everything else is, we should all be operating pretty close the same.